Okay, so with that document that you provided, we've just taken some, like a handful of the different areas under different teams just to really be able to illustrate what it might look like.
Hmm.
Obviously, you'll have a lot more to add into
Yep.
this, but on screen here, you can see this is our location structure. So our location structure can be added in a number of different ways, but its purpose is to A, roster, B, do timesheets, C, do reporting for like costing analysis, and then D, come out into your general ledger as well. So it's kind of got that four-pronged approach. How you structure this, though, is entirely up to you. There is no requirement here. However, it does work in like a tree structure. So you've got like level one, level two, level three, etc. So what we often see where customers need to go delving deep into, the role that they're undertaking, or in your case, it's definitely listing off the different roles and rooms depending on the area. We would usually build that into a tree structure that looks like this. So
Okay.
we've got your master location is just the name of the business. Your secondary locations are those different departments that you've
Hmm.
got. So
Hmm.
doctors, QI team, we've got RADA team as well. And then our sub locations are the actual roles of each of those areas. And you
Hmm.
can have as many as you'd like, and you can even delve even deeper if you'd really like to. But from this perspective, this is what will determine how employees are rostered and where they're assigned to for those
Hmm.
purposes. So
Okay.
creating it like this, the only thing to know here is that the anniversary day is really important. So if you do operate in more than one area, you will need to make sure that those locations are duplicated. It's for
No.
public holiday purposes. But if you're in one place, it's all good. It's nice
Yep.
and
We're
easy.
Wellington. Yep.
Perfect. Nice and clean and simple. When we onboard an employee, and I'll just quickly show you a random employee file before we go into the rosters, just to give an illustration. You may have already covered this, but I just want to make sure that all ducks in a row, especially because um, we are like recording this just in case you want a copy. But when we onboard an employee, effectively we're attaching them to a default location and
Hmm.
secondary locations. So your default location is where you predominantly work. It's where most of your costings usually go to. Honestly, it could be any location that you pick. You could pick it as the parent, you could pick it as the sub location. It really doesn't matter, but it will be available for that employee to pick in their timesheets and to be rostered to. Then we
Oh,
have
okay.
secondary locations, and secondary locations are other places that they can work.
Okay.
So what you might have is you might have everyone just ticked to the subs, or
Yep.
you might have them also ticked to doctors and Masterton. It really doesn't matter
Okay.
as long as we're coaching employees and educating them on what they should be picking in their timesheets.
Yep.
I think it's pretty straightforward though. Like your structure is super easy to understand, to be honest. So I think it can work really well in our system.
Okay.
When it comes to rostering, there are different ways that we can roster, and it depends on who you are, what access you get, and what is your responsibility within the business. So I think you may have mentioned that you have your different departments, which is your doctors, your RADA team, etc. And there is someone responsible for each of them, like an individual people responsible. They're not
Hmm.
rostering all of them at once.
No.
Perfect. So if I was a user and I had access only to the doctors and those sub locations, what
Hmm.
I am effectively going to see is only those locations in the rostering screen. I'm
Nice.
not going to get the rest of the business because I don't need it.
Yep.
Now, you and I, as an admin, we'd be able to see everything. So we want these filters here to really drill down.
Hmm.
So I've just added a couple of examples in based on that doctor's roster. I think I've got Karina in here and John in here, but they're under the guise of our famous friends here, just so we don't have their actual names. But you can see, like as a sample, this is one way that we could view it. So the location is in this grey bar here. You can see this is the TRM clinic. And then we've got any employees that are rostered listed underneath with their shift times associated as well. And if there's more than one person, it'll just be listed in alphabetical order. This is
Nice.
the main
Okay.
way that people roster, at least to get everybody in there. We can also have unassigned shifts as well if you don't know who needs to be attached, but you know that you
Yep.
need it, for
Need someone.
example.
Yeah. Perfect.
And then we can fill it in with whoever might be the recommended employee, aka they have access to that location and they're available at that time,
Hmm.
or other employees which may have conflictions.
Okay.
But I can't roster someone who's already rostered. There will be
Sure.
employees.
Okay. That's good.
Now, this isn't the be all and end all. There's different views that you can take. I think it's important that, like, the view that you can see on your PDF is very similar to sorting it by the start time.
Hmm.
where instead of it being, by employee listed on the left-hand side, I'm viewing the locations, but I'm viewing it based on start time. So I just get a list in order of who's going to be there at what time. So you can
Okay.
see how it orders it by the start time here, 8 a.m., 9 a.m., and it's got the employee's name in smaller characters here. This is just a view. Every single user can use it in whatever way they'd like. They're not locked into one particular way. So they'll find it what works best for them, and their settings are theirs alone. It's not going to change for everybody else. If I move to a different filter, I can now see that there's additional shifts that are rostered as well. You can see I've got Jennifer and Jennifer here. I think they're the equivalent of Gerard and Shroffy, who are in those PDFs.
Oh, yep.
And
Cool.
if an
Yep.
employee has more than one shift on a day, very easy to see that they've got more than one shift. It's not going to move it around unless they're at different locations.
Yep.
But again, there's different views that we can take to sort and to group by.
So sorry, if I had Jennifer Aniston was in room 4 from 8 till 11,
Mhm.
but then she was in the urgent care clinic in the afternoon. It would just show the morning under room 4, and then up under the urgent care, it would show her in the afternoon, wouldn't it?
Correct. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's exactly
Yep.
what happened. There is
Perfect.
one employee that I rostered who is in two different locations. I think it was who was it? Who did I put in? It might have been our Arnold, who I think is the equivalent of Karina. Yeah. So they're in both the RADA template and in
Yep.
the doctor's template. So
Yeah,
when I
correct.
look at each of them, you can see here that there is shifts here. If
Yep.
I only have access to RADA, this is all I see. But if I try to put them on, you can clearly see that they're rostered to this
Nice.
location, and I
But
can't do
if we
anything.
printed the doctor's roster, we would see that Arnold's in urgent care in the afternoon.
Exactly right. And if
Yeah,
you as a user see everything, then when I have a look at all of my rosters together, I can clearly see that the employee is in more than one place
nice.
based on the different locations. And there's
Perfect.
different views as well. Like if I wanted to view it by business, instead, I'm not actually separating locations. I just want to see who is there. You can see
Sure.
all of their shifts here,
Sure.
which are aligned to more than one location, where I can just see the different location. So
Okay.
views are everything. How you use it is like the most important thing.
Yep.
Now, if you've got common shifts, like let's say there's employees that always work the same hours or they work the
Yep.
same days of the week at the same places more often than not, roster templates are a really good function.
Yeah,
Roster templates,
roster templates all the time. Yep.
perfect. I reckon if you
Yep.
create roster templates here, all you're having to do is copy and paste them
Yeah.
in and make small adjustments, which is so
Yeah.
much easier than
Just
doing it
adjust for those staff that are on leave. Yep.
Yes,
Perfect.
exactly. And leave will appear in here as well. So if there's any
Okay.
employees that are on leave or are unavailable, you will be able to see them. I'll just show you an example of that because Jess, thankfully, you do have in your platform. Leave is highlighted in purple and unavailability is highlighted in red. So this is
Okay.
like an unavailability request from the employee that basically just says, hey, I can't work this day. It can be
Okay.
ongoing or it can just be one-off
What do you
session.
mean they can't work?
Yes.
Um,
Give me a
so
reason.
that's for our casual staff can make themselves unavailable for periods of time. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if they're studying. Like I find that often students are very much like every Friday I can't work, and then just putting it in as unavailability, like that would help.
Yep.
Now you can still put shifts on, of course, because people can still work and then go home sick or vice versa, or
Sure.
maybe do part days leave. However, it's not going to stop you from being rostered there, but it would be an indicator for a manager who's doing the rostering to say, all right, I can see this person's on sick leave. If there is a shift, I can just drag it to somebody else.
Sure.
I don't have to recreate.
Okay.
So just to illustrate, and this is a bad pay period, let's put data here. Go back to our filtering. If I wanted to move this shift from Arnold to somebody else, I can just drag it to be unassigned if I wanted to. I can click into any shift, even if it's attached to someone, and just change the employee that's assigned if I
Nice.
really want to. You can do shift bidding, which is if you can send it out to multiple people if that's what you'd like, and then
Oh,
first come, first
nice.
serve.
I like
Um,
that.
it is a first come, first serve though, but in terms
Yeah.
of like shift bidding, you can create bidding groups as well. So whilst I've got
Yep.
recommended and other employees here, I can create a group in the system that says all casuals because maybe I want to appeal to them before I
Yep.
appeal to my full timers. Might be
Nice.
cheaper to have them.
Nice.
So you can do that as well, which is helpful. And you can also turn on approval. So if, for example, you send out shift bidding and someone picks it up and you want to make sure a manager says yes to whoever's picking it up every time, then we can turn that on as well. And a manager just has to okay it.
Nice. So just a couple of questions, if I can.
Yeah.
So firstly, if somebody is rostered on a shift and then they clock in and clock out
Mhm.
with a timesheet that matches that shift, does it auto approve or does
We
the
can
manager?
we can
Yep.
turn that on. It is a setting. So if
Okay.
there is that, if you do have that setting on and want that to work, then
Yep.
absolutely we can have that turned on. It
Okay.
means then for
Cool.
a manager looking at their approved shifts, there's way less to have a look at if
Yeah.
it matches
Okay.
exactly.
And then if you have somebody rostered to a shift and they call in sick,
Mhm.
is there some way of in the system advising that they are sick and then being able to replace them on that shift with another staff member so that when the person logs in and logs out, it matches the roster?
Yes, so you can either leave the shift as it is and just mark them as being sick. There is a sick leave taken work type
Oh,
here
yeah.
that just indicates on the roster. It's just a roster that at the end of the day, the employee has to submit a leave request
Right.
for it to go through to the pay run because rosters are just rosters.
Okay.
You can then leave that there and then create another one and give it to somebody else, or you can drag it and give it to somebody else.
Oh,
So
okay.
if we think about how we can use the like a keyboard shortcuts, if I want to copy that shift and move it elsewhere but keep the original record, I just need to click control on my keyboard and then I can just drag it away and then I can
Ah, okay.
give it to somebody else.
So just going back to what you said before, though, if an employee calls in sick, they still have to put in a leave request?
They do have to put in a leave request, yeah, because a
Okay.
roster is just a planned shift. It's just
Yeah, of
a
course.
yeah, it's just like advising when we're due to work, but we want the actual timesheets and leave requests to represent what's actually happened.
Yeah, so at the moment we create the sick leave timesheet, if you like, if the person calls in sick, but theoretically they should be applying for it.
Yes, we do want to the employees to get into the habit of owning that type of process for
Yeah.
themselves.
Okay, cool.
Now, it depends on obviously like your pay frequency and then what your deadlines will be, because sometimes employees aren't going to just go and submit
Yeah.
their sick leave request, but
Yeah.
managers can do it on their behalf in
Okay.
HR as well. So
Nice.
managers, admins, or the employee can do it. You
Yep.
might want to make the employee do it as a first point of call, but then have some disaster recovery processes
Yeah.
in place just in
Nice.
case. But
Yep.
you can see if I was to mark that as a sick leave work type here, work types are outside of standard conditions. You can see it
Yep.
immediately turns purple. So it's like a very clear indicator in the roster that this person's sick. But I can keep the record and then give it to somebody else still. It's not going to stop me giving another shift to another person.
Mm.
There is another function available if you want to turn it on. It's about 50-50 if clients do. Shift swapping, where an employee can elect to give their shift to
Oh, yeah.
somebody else and swap
Yep.
the shift. You can go through approvals for that as well. For example, if I'm trying to swap with Jess, but Jess is worth more than me, I can make a manager go through an approval to say, I don't want that person to because it'll cost
Oh,
me money.
okay. Yep.
Yeah, just some functions that you can consider using. Not a necessity, of course. Um, Now in the platform subscription that you have, like I'm doing this in payroll at the moment just to illustrate, but this is the same view that you're going to see in the HR. So as an employee, as a manager, they're going to be interacting completely from the exact same platform. Like there's going to be nowhere else that they interact with the system.
Hmm.
This is just me looking in the back end as an admin effectively.
Yep. I understand.
Nice and easy and clean. Are there any questions or concerns or anything that you have relating to those
So
rosters?
once you've completed your roster and you're ready to publish it,
Yes.
can you does it push those shifts out to the relevant employees
Yes,
so that they're aware? And then can you also print a copy like what I sent you so that you can display it on a notice board?
yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
when you're ready to, clicking the publish will send out the notification to employees. It'll come
Yep.
through as a push notification on their phone.
Oh, yeah.
So they'll just like immediately get that pop up like every other app decides to do these days.
Yeah.
And then of course they can go into their phone at any time and see any rostered shifts that they've got for the current pay period or the next pay period. So they're
Okay.
not limited to just looking at one shift.
Yeah.
And then you do have the ability to print. So we've got the print button here, which we can kind of change our parameters, much like you see on this left-hand side banner. So you can change the view and then you can print it and it just comes up as like a PDF that you can then print off very much in the same way.
Hmm.
Just a slightly different look and feel. It'll look more like our grid here.
Okay.
It's not that it's actually not that different, to be honest, from your current view. And then of course there are some like different ways to like export it as well if you want to export it to Excel and manipulate it a little bit, but I would recommend
Oh,
not
yeah.
doing that because it's just a bit of extra steps unnecessary.
Yeah. Okay.
How does that sound, Robin?
Yeah, it looks good.
Nice and nice and
Yeah.
clean. I find it really easy to use if you're a manager. You know, you've got your one site to manage, but then you as an admin can see overarching like everything that's
Yeah.
happening and keep track of everything, which is good. There's a number of roster templates that can be created, so you're not limited to just one. You could have many types. I know a lot of customers do peak versus off-peak periods, regardless of the industry, and you're always going to have peak areas or peak
Sure.
times of the year, right, where people get more sick potentially than others.
Yeah, sure.
And so you can have any number of templates that you'd like. It's just a matter of making sure that they keep them up to date, and then they
Yeah.
basically pop them into any pay period they want, and they can copy and paste everything forward and backwards as well if they want.
Hmm. Okay.
Quite user friendly from that perspective.
I'm just trying to think of the things that the current system does that we particularly like, but I think I've covered it all. The big thing for me is that Human Force was one of the only programs that I could find where you could roster by role. Most other programs I've looked at, apart from Employment Hero, you had to roster by employee, and that just doesn't work for us because we're looking at who's in rooms and who's in clinics, and so you need to be able to see where the gaps are and what you need to fill, and yeah, so I think that would work really well.
Cool.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. Like with Employment Hero, there are so many different ways to get the same outcome. It's just about
Yeah.
the configuration. So I believe this configuration would be the best for you
Yeah,
in terms of
yeah,
just
I
day-to-day
agree.
operations.
I
And then
agree.
from a reporting perspective, it also gives you that flexibility to, you know, you can roll everything up to see all doctors' areas at once, or you can start
Yeah.
to drill down into specific areas if you really
Yeah.
want to.
Yeah. So when you're talking about permissions, so even though we've got all those locations, can the nurse manager would just concentrate on her nurse clinics and the admin manager would just concentrate on her admin, and then I would have an overview of everything?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. So
Yeah.
as a manager, I only see the employees that are my direct reports.
Yeah.
So your direct reports is based on your employee file settings in the HR system. So I'll be
Yeah.
able to,
Nice.
yeah, I'll have a primary and or a secondary manager as well. And
Nice.
that person will be able to see my rosters, manage me, manage my locations, etc.
Yeah.